The impeachment trial of President Donald Trump starts today in the Senate, and there is no better time than now to go through some of the really bad faith arguments that are being made against this entire impeachment trial so that we can sort of get off on the right foot and not fall for these, because you are going to be gaslit and you are going to be grandstanded during this process. And I want to get ahead of that if we can. So first of all, there's the argument of the things Trump did, even if true, are not impeachable, sometimes with the added version of because there's no crime in what Donald Trump did. Now, as many of you know, if you watched yesterday's show, or if you've been around for a while, you do not need a crime to impeach a president. We have video actually of Alan Dershowitz, which has gone viral, where back in the 1990s, despite now being a defender of Donald Trump, he said, you do not need a crime to impeach a president, despite saying something very different. Now, here's Dershowitz himself. We showed this on yesterday's show.
It certainly doesn't have to be a crime. If you have somebody who completely corrupts the office of president and who abuses trust and who poses great danger to our liberty, you don't need a technical crime. But remember that because the executive power is vested in one person, the president, unlike the judicial power, which is vested in justices of the Supreme Court and inferior judges, or the legislative power in 100 senators and 400 and something representatives, we have one president. And to impeach a president is like a nonviolent revolution. It is the most dramatic act of undoing democracy that is possible, and that's why the framers use the term treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors to suggest the English analogy to great offenses of state. We look at their acts of state. We look at how they conduct the foreign policy. We look at whether they try to subvert the Constitution the way Iran-Contra did.
Okay, so just don't fall for it. Whether a crime has been committed is not actually at issue here. It does not dictate whether a conviction or acquittal in the Senate impeachment trial is appropriate. If there have been crimes committed, then once Donald Trump or whatever president is no longer in office, they can conceivably be indicted for those. That's a separate legal process. That's a totally different thing, not relevant to what we are dealing with starting today, the Senate impeachment trial of Donald Trump. Now, another version of this is, okay, you don't need a crime to impeach, but abuse of power specifically, which is one of the two things that Donald Trump is being impeached for, is not impeachable. Trump, of course, 2 articles of impeachment, abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. And you're starting to hear more and more, abuse of power is simply not something that's impeachable. Don't be confused by that. Abuse of power was one of the articles of impeachment that was adopted by the House Judiciary Committee against Richard Nixon in 1974. It was adopted against Bill Clinton in 1998. It's nonsense. This is a talking point that will rot your brain if you allow it to. It has already rotted the brain of many unhinged, unflinching defenders of Donald Trump. Second, whistleblower-related talking points. For example, the whistleblower was lying. The whistleblower committed a crime by coming forward. The whistleblower, we should know who the whistleblower is. How can you go forward without even knowing who the original whistleblower on the Ukraine stuff was? Anything suggesting that all of the impeachment process is invalid because of something related to the original whistleblower. Don't fall for it. That's irrelevant now. There have been endless corroborations of all of the things that the whistleblower initially said by people whose identities we know, who were put under oath and testified before the House Intelligence and House Judiciary Committees. Even though there's really no problem with the whistleblower not being identified publicly, we don't even really need their assertions for impeachment to make sense. And I've used this analogy before. Imagine that someone anonymously calls the cops and says, at 100 Main Street right now, there's a burglary in progress, and the burglars are stealing TVs and expensive works of art. The police show up, other neighbors corroborate, they find someone red-handed burglarizing. Does it matter that the original call to police was anonymous once you have witnesses and a believed perpetrator and evidence of the crime? No, it doesn't make any difference. In fact, even if the first call wrongly said they're stealing TVs and works of art, and when police show up, they say, oh, no, you know what? They didn't actually steal any works of art. It was just TVs. Once the police figure out what's going on, it still doesn't matter that the call came in from someone who was anonymous or that the caller got something wrong. Do not fall for that talking point about whistleblowers. Number 3. There's the Joe Biden Hunter Biden, Ukraine corruption angle, okay? And there's a couple versions of that one. There is, this really is about corruption in Ukraine, which Donald Trump was trying to fix. Trump shouldn't be getting impeached for it. Or this really should be about the corruption of Joe and Hunter Biden. Now, these are two different stories, right? One is Trump did nothing wrong and his actions were justified because he wanted to deal with Ukrainian corruption. That has been debunked circumstantially by witnesses. And remember that Donald Trump is looking into legalizing bribery of foreign officials, as I told you yesterday. It doesn't pass the smell test that Donald Trump's priority here was dealing with Ukrainian corruption. The other talking point is this really should be about the Bidens, Joe and Hunter Biden. Now, I've said, let's look into the revolving door of influence peddling, family members of politicians getting cushy jobs. Let's look at all of that. And you would have many people in Donald Trump's family who are guilty of that as well. But it's a separate issue. It is not what impeachment is about. Do not allow that talking point to distract you. This is not about Joe Biden. Next, there are Republican talking points about we don't have firsthand evidence. It's all hearsay. Well, Republicans are trying to block witnesses who would give firsthand evidence of what Donald Trump did, said, and wanted to do. They can't be allowed to invoke that talking point while simultaneously blocking witnesses. As I told you earlier, the White House is going crazy trying to prevent Lev Parnas from testifying in the Senate impeachment trial. The White House is considering classifying former National Security Advisor John Bolton's testimony to prevent that from being public. And yet they say it's all hearsay. We don't have firsthand witnesses. First of all, hearsay is a valid form of evidence in such a trial. Secondly, it's not all hearsay. We had plenty of firsthand evidence in the House hearings. And third, we'd have a whole hell of a lot more of that firsthand evidence if they stopped trying to block witnesses. So will we get a fair trial? No. Will senators be unbiased arbiters of this trial? No, of course they will not. But at least don't fall for the bogus talking points, these 4 or 5 talking points that they are trotting out and repeating ad nauseum, because they are just that. They are bogus talking points that should make you nauseous. The fact that so many of these talking points work is in part because so much of the country either is busy living their lives where they hear it and they don't really have the time or wherewithal or resources to go and investigate it, and I sympathize with that, or because they've been successfully primed by Donald Trump with talking points like fake news and all of this stuff to simply disbelieve anything that sounds like maybe Donald Trump did the wrong thing. Maybe the White House's intentions are not fully on the up and up. All I can do is tell you what the talking points are and why they don't make sense. Let's all now be armed with them as the Senate impeachment trial gets going. So you're someone who enjoys thinking about politics. You love learning about countless other topics, but you just don't have enough time in your week to read or listen to all the books you've been meaning to get to. Blinkist is an app that will completely transform the way that you absorb information and ideas, because what they do is take thousands of nonfiction books, extract the most important insights and information, and then present each book to you as text or audio, which you can consume in just 15 minutes. Imagine how well-rounded you will become once you have the ability to read 5 books in one sitting or listen to a new book on your commute every day. Obviously, we should read the full versions of books whenever we can. It's what I try to do. But it is a reality that there's a whole world of books out there that you will never get to, but Blinkist will help you get to more. I've just finished listening to Upheaval by Jared Diamond. Jared Diamond, a tremendous author whose work I've previously recommended. Excellent book looking at some of modern history's biggest national crises to figure out how different countries ended up in such precarious situations. You'll be able to have conversations with people about totally new topics. You can feed your curiosity in ways that you've never been able to before. And the best part is it's only about $8 a month, which gives you unlimited access to every single book in their catalog. They have books on politics, economics, philosophy, science, you name it. You can try it out yourself, totally free for a week, and get 25% off if you decide to subscribe just by going to Blinkist.com/Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video. Like the rest of us, I bet you're going into 2020 thinking about what you didn't get around to in 2019 and your goals for the new year. If you want to work towards being your best self in 2020, understand more about the world around you, and make sure that your time is well spent, then Blinkist is for you.